Hello there, friends and sane persons. My name is Kyle. This is Wednesday again, and it's time for a redo of this week's Wednesday Whimsy. Wednesday Whimsy is, of course, a short show that I do every Wednesday evening where I talk about a board game topic, a top 10, some sort of board game related thing that happens to be on my mind. For some reason, my sound died in the last one, and then all of a sudden my recording shut off. I hope there's nothing wrong here. A gremlin seems to have gotten into the system. I don't honestly know how far I got before I got cut off, so I'm going to start all over again from the beginning. I don't really know what happened there. Sometimes the internet has its other ideas. Anyway, this week what I thought I was going to talk about was going to be my top 10 board game designers. With Gen Con recently happening and Essen happening soon, lots of board games and announcements are coming. And, I tend to get really excited about certain people when I know that they're involved in a board game. And so I thought this week it would be fun to talk about 10 of my favorite people involved in board games, people who make games that I really enjoy. These are not necessarily the people who designed my favorite games. These are people who they have a really good proven track record with me, and I really enjoy the types of games that they make. Anyway, with that out of the way, I'm going to get started. I'll tell you a little bit about the designer, not that much about, I'm not going to give their history or anything, but I will tell you about what I like about them, maybe some of the games that they have made, and we'll see how it goes from there. So let's get ready for my number 10. My number 10 is a very outgoing and memorable person, a person who is involved in a lot of great games, both as a designer and also as a sort of producer and publisher. And this person is Ignaz Terzic. Yeah, I don't do pronunciation very well, but that's fine. I've done my best here. Let me find him online, and we will talk about him. So, Polish individual, Polish game company Portal Games. He loves to say Ignacy Trzewiczek Portal Games. That's sort of his introduction. His games tend to be interesting. They tend to have some sort of unique feel to them. They feel like they're kind of their own thing. Some of my favorites of his are Stronghold, which was remade later on, but it as Stronghold, but is a game with a player-on-player, head-to-head, very asymmetric game where one person is a horde of monsters invading a castle and the other person is a team of defenders defending that castle. Other good ones, Robinson Crusoe is probably his most famous one. 51st State and its derivatives, Imperial Settlers, and 51st State, a kind of a derivative of itself. Pret-a-Porter is also one that many people enjoy. He has just a lot of. He also did Detective Modern Crime board game, which I wasn't a huge fan of. But you don't have to love everything a person does. But whenever he is putting something out, or I know he's going to be involved with something, I always stop and take note. And that's why he is my number 10. Let's go on now to my number 9. All right, my number 9 is a French designer, also with his own unique style. This person is Bruno Cathala. So Bruno Cathala isn't necessarily, as far as I know, associated with a particular game studio. He tends to work with a lot. He's a very friendly and personable person, very involved, and his games tend to be colorful, well-produced, and really just very interesting and easy to get into and teach people. Some of the highlights from his game designer CV, Mr. Jack, Cleopatra and the Society of Architects, Cyclades, probably his most famous game, Five Tribes, arguably another one of his most famous games, Abyss, one of his really, really good ones, Queen and King Domino, and even Seven Wonders Duel. He often works with others, but whatever he's involved, I know that it's the kind of game that's going to be great to look at, interesting to play, well thought out, not a whole lot of, weird edge cases, not very complicated, the kind of game I can just sit down and play with anybody. And I think that makes for a great game. I am always interested if I know that he is involved. And plus, his name sounds a little bit like Cthulhu. So why not? Anyway, that's my number 8, or 9, Bruno Cathala. Let's go now to my real number 8. My number 8 is I believe, Hungarian designer, most associated with his company Mind Clash Games, but he does a lot. His name is on a lot of games. This person is David Torsi. David Torsi, most famous game is probably Anachrony, but he's also been involved in the Imperium series, of a complicated series of deck building games. He did this Budapest game that I was not really keen on. I was actually a little disappointed by it. Defensive Procyon 3, I've actually not played, although I have it sitting behind me, sort of a root-style game. Perseverance, Castaway Chronicles was another one that he did. All of his games tend to be complicated, whereas Bruno Cathala's all tend to be simple. David Torsi skews complicated. They tend to have lots of interesting concepts, lots of different modules that can be added in, lots of fun, thinky things to do. They often twist common board game mechanisms and make them even more interesting. And then also he is involved, you can see it says 111, he has done so many solo modes for other people's games. He's just sort of the king of the solo mode. And so he's just really very involved in board games. His solo modes tend to be on the complicated side, but he does a good job at creating predictable, sort of some level of predictability with some level of randomness, and having sort of AI opponents rather than beat your high score methods, where you can sort of, the AI opponent will touch just certain points of the game enough that you feel like you're interacting with another person, but also not so much that you have to use a complicated flowchart. And I always appreciate that. Anyway, both for solo modes and for sort of regular old games, David Torsi is a great designer. I'm always interested when he's involved, and that's why he's my number 8. Let's go on now to my number 7. All right, my number 7, and this is, I believe, where I cut out last time. So if you watched the old one, this is where stuff will start getting new. This is, I believe, an American designer. I never know for sure. The picture sure looks like he is, though. It says he's from Los Angeles. This is John D. Clare. John D. Clare is best known probably for Space Base, but he has also done a lot of other really interesting games, and he's also well known for this card crafting system. Fortunately, it's not his only trick, but he did it with Mystic Vale, with Dead Reckoning, which is just a fantastic game, with Edge of Darkness, which is more complicated. Custom Heroes, a weird trick-taking game. He's done Cubitos, which is a little racing game. Apparently Ecos, which is a bingo-style game. Whatever he gets involved in, it tends to be fun. That sort of tends to be his... obviously, they're all trying to make something that's fun. But his games just tend to be fun, and especially the simpler ones tend to just be super focused and easy to get into. But bigger games like Dead Reckoning are also a lot of fun if you're willing to put the work in and get them done. Just somebody that I'm really interested in when he's involved, and just a great game designer. My number 7, John D. Clare. Let's go on now to my number 6. All right, my number 6 is a game designer who has made some of my very favorite games. He has a series of big games that just are so well beloved and well regarded by lots of people. This designer, I believe Canadian, if I'm not mistaken, mistaken. This is, of course, Eric Lang. And I don't know why I can't find this. Hold on. We, we ended up with a lot of interest. Here we go. All right. Eric M. Lang is the next one here. And Eric Lang. So, interesting person, kind of an odd duck, but as a personality. But his most famous game is probably Blood Rage. But in his series, we have Rising Sun and Ankh, Gods of Egypt, Cthulhu Death May Die, just a fantastic cooperative game. Bloodborne, one of the best video game board game implementations that there is. And sure, not everything's been a hit, but most things for him have, for me, they tend to be very thematically rich games with interesting twists on them, often inspired by other games. He used to work with Cool Mini or Not. I don't think he is anymore, but he used to just do everything with them, and so they made these big lavish productions. I think his favorite game of mine is Chaos in the Old World, which has been re-implemented in a couple of other forms through his later games, but just really an interesting, outgoing person, and he makes games that are designed from the beginning to be very fun and memorable experiences. So that's my number 6, Eric Lang. And let's go on now to my number. All right, my number 5 is one of those sort of big name game designers that everyone in the Euro game world has heard of. Um, and he is famous for, well, lots of different things, actually. This is, of course, Ule Rosenberg, German, I believe German designer. And his games he puts out a lot of stuff, right? He puts out farming games. He did the Bean game, Bonanza, and a couple of spin-offs on that. And then he went into a polyomino phase. And then, once he gets his mind set on something, he will design a lot of games that are kind of based around that mechanism. And so you sort of see kind of his process and evolution as he goes along. I believe his most famous game is going to be Agricola. Agricola, this farming game where you kind of ushered in the whole idea of feeding your people or suffering a penalty. He's also done, like I mentioned, Bonanza, a simple light card game about trading beans. And then he has this polyomino series that the best entry in that is probably A Feast for Odin. But even, with his other games, they're all real. I mean, I think Le Havre is probably my favorite of his games total, but his games they always tend to be events. They tend to be large. They tend to be very well designed. He does great rule books, usually with a little picture of himself giving helpful hints in the margins. And whenever he is coming out with a game, it is one that I want to see. Not every iteration is as successful as every other one, but it's it's just he's a game designer that I really enjoy, and I'm always excited when I hear that something from him is coming out. So that's my number 5, Ule Rosenberg. Let's go on now. Okay, and at number 4, I have to cheat just a little bit. Now, I'm not really cheating because I think these people, I'm putting 3 people in my next spot, and I don't know that I'll be able to find a picture of all 3, but it almost is going to sound like a law firm here, and that is Carlson, and Wigless. They are most famous for the game. For some reason, it's Too Many Bones. I have here Cloudspire showing just so I can try and find a picture. Here's one of them, but It's brothers. I think Carlson and Carlson, Adam and Josh Carlson, I think are brothers, and then Josh Wigless is someone who works with them, and they really just work together. So Too Many Bones, one of their games, a really big game, a game I love. Cloudspire, another game I love. Hoplomachus, a game that I have grown to love a lot recently. Burn Cycle, another great game. They don't put out a lot of games, but they put a lot into their games. They tend to be, this is chip theory games, and so they tend to be overly overproduced. They'll have lots of chips in them, poker chips. They'll have lots of neoprene, and they will be games that are designed to be very fun and feel like nothing else. Now, I will say, their rule book writing skills aren't always the best, and sometimes their games can be pretty complicated. None of these games is what you would be describing as simple or short. But anyway, chip theory games and this team of game designers is just really somebody to watch out for. And it's probably, I think when we did my publishers list with Ilya, I think it was my number one because it's a publisher I'm always interested in, and they really do all the work for this publisher. So they are clearly on my list, and they are in my number 4 spot. So there you go. Carlson, and Wigless are my number 4 game designer. Let's go on now to my number 3. All right, so I talked earlier about Bruno Cathala and how he often works with other designers. And this next one, my number 3, is another one of those who's always really working with someone else. But whenever he's involved, I know I'm going to enjoy the game. These are games that as soon as I find out, it doesn't matter the theme, doesn't matter the topic, if he or his cohorts are involved in the game, it's something that I know I'm going to love. And that is Simone Luciani. So his games, how shall we say it? The best one for me is The Voyages of Marco Polo. He works a lot on these big tea games. Grand Austria Hotel is another one I love. Council of Four, another one I love. And you'll see from this list here on the screen, he often is doing it with someone else. Barrage, another great game. They all tend to be sort of Euro-y style games, and they tend to have a lot of tracks, a lot of sort of do this to do this to do this, and I find that to be just absolutely fascinating. So he's one where I don't know, I'm not even sure if he's ever designed a game on his own. He probably has. But his games that describes him here, Tzolk'in itself that was sort of the one that put his name on the map. But everything else he's touched, I don't think he has done a game that I have not enjoyed. I guess I've not played Anunnaki Dawn of the Gods, but it looks like it's not come out yet. So there we go. Darwin's Journey was one that I recently played and really enjoyed. Whatever he's involved with, though, I can just sort of describe it, and I know, if you like one of his games, you tend to like all of the rest because they have a lot of common DNA. And as a designer, that sort of level of consistency and the ability to deliver hit after hit is just fascinating and very commendable. So my number 3 there is Simone Luciani. 2 left to go. First one is number 2. So my number 2 designer, and I struggled between my 2 and my 1, to be honest, because I like both of them quite a lot. And whenever either of these people puts out a game, it's an event for me. I know right away it is a game I want. So let's go with the one who landed on my number 2, and that is Alexander Pfister. Alexander Pfister is from Austria, and his games, he's also has a sort of a wide spectrum of games he designs, but they tend to be fairly complicated Euro-type games. He won the Spiel des Jahres award, I believe, for Broom Service in his earlier days, and then also for Isle of Skye, so that's twice. That's pretty impressive. But he's also done, I mean, my favorite games from his, Boon Lake, Maracaibo, and of course his very best game, Great Western Trail. They all tend to have mechanisms that are somewhat recycled from each other, but none of them ever feel the same. You might have, he's just not afraid to try something special, something unique, something different. And his games tend to be a little long, a little complicated, but they tend to be just so interestingly well developed. They're never very high on theme, so if that's what you're looking for, you might be disappointed. But in terms of just a delightful game experience, these games by Alexander Pfister tend to be, I mean, as soon as I know one is coming out, I want it. I've already pre-ordered Great Western Trail New Zealand because he's involved in it. It's Great Western Trail, and I know I'm just going to love it. Not everything's been a hit. His Hong Kong game I found to be lackluster, but one dud after lots of hits. I think that's a pretty good record. So Alexander Pfister, my number 2. Let's go on now to my number 1. All right, my number 1 is another one of those designers where he does not put out a lot of games. He really just puts out kind of one game a year, and it is always an event. And the picture of him looks like it was. I mean, I don't. It's a very bad picture of him that I'll show here. He looks like it was candidly caught, and that was the only one somebody could find of him. But this is Vladimir Sushi, I believe Czech. I never quite know. Well, no, he did the game Praga Kapodregny. That has to be Czech. But his games, he's not put out a lot of them, like I said, but each one of them has been a hit for me. Woodcraft, one of the best games of 2022. Messina, one of the best games of 2021. Praga Kapodregny, it came out in 2020 and got really overlooked, but it's a fantastically well-designed game. Underwater Cities, probably his best and best known game. Pulsar, Last Will, all of his games. Okay, I haven't played League of Six or Shipyard, but the games I have played, I have just loved. He has a small company called Delicious Games that puts out a game pretty much every year. It tends to be very well received, and it's just, I know of it's one of the things I look forward to in the fourth quarter of the year is trying Vladimir Sushi's new game. So, he could have been my number 2 after Alexander Pfister if it had been a different day of the week. But those two, Pfister and Sushi, I would love that combination, by the way. But they both make games that I just love, and I'm always excited. I know I am buying it when I hear they're making something. And there you have it. That's my top 10 designers, part 2. Once more with feeling. I will say there were several that I didn't have room for. Rainer Knizia, sort of a legendary Pantheon-style game designer. Stefan Feld, a designer who really has sort of pioneered the point salad style of game. Friedman Friese, this mad scientist game designer who tries weird off-the-wall things, and sometimes they work and sometimes they fail, but they're always an interesting experience. Vladic Vatil, I wasn't even able to put him on. He did Through the Ages, one of the best games ever made, and then also mega hits like Codenames and Galaxy Trucker, really fun games. There's a lot of really good board game designers. I only had really time to talk about 10, and since I had to do it twice, I'm glad I only did 10. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm not as good at this as I should be, but hey, we'll get there. So I hope you've enjoyed my ramblings, and I will look forward to talking to you about something else next week. Until then, I'll wish you safe travels and courage when you need it, and I will see you back here next time for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.